The agenda is set. Hello, everyone. I'm Brent Goff in Berlin. The final chance to close the deal. Obama and Romney lock horns over America's place in the world. Will it matter on Election Day? That and more on my agenda. It's time to talk. It's called the Forgotten Holocaust. The Nazis murdered 500,000 Roma and Sinti. This week, Germany unveils a memorial to the victims. Why did it take so long? And why is Europe's largest minority still a target of discrimination? In the U.S. presidential campaign, who wants to talk about foreign policy? It's all about the economy, stupid. A presidential debate with a lesson on how to turn foreign policy into domestic economics. We'll talk about who won the final debate, and we'll talk about what the world wants from its only superpower. And when was the last time you watched people light up a cigarette at a dinner party? Well, some say the battle against smoking has been won in the West. The fight now is in the developing world. And what about those accusations of dirty tricks by big tobacco? Well, I've invited three people today to talk, argue, and pry apart these headlines. My first guest has been called one of the three most dangerous people in the world by the tobacco industry. Smoker rights groups have labeled her an insane psychotic, just like Adolf Hitler. Well, here she is, a woman who doesn't look very insane, Dr. Judith McKay. Dr. McKay, you are a longtime anti-tobacco activist. You're a senior advisor to the World Health Organization. You live in Hong Kong. There are 300 million smokers alone in China. Is the final frontier of fighting tobacco in Asia?
It is.
And are we winning that frontier? Just briefly.
I think the systems are being put into place that will bring the epidemic down, but actually there will be more smokers 30 years from now because of that population bulge in the low and middle income countries. Okay. So even if we bring the percentage down, it will be overridden.
All right. Yeah. All right. We're going to talk a little bit about that math in just a moment. My second guest says that the presidential debates are still very important. He says social media will be full of comments about what we saw on Monday night. I'm happy to have Christoph Rosenthal on the show. He is a member of the Young Transatlanticists. And Christoph, you stayed up and watched the show here in Europe because it was in the middle of the night here in Europe. So, kudos to you for staying up to watch the debate. Tell me, who won this one?
I think clearly Obama. I'm not that sure as the people CBS interviewed just after the debate. I think 52% said Obama won and only about 20% was on Romney's side. Mm-hmm. I think it was a much closer race, just as a whole campaign. I think they both did a brilliant job.
All right, we're going to talk about that job in just a second. My next guest is a Holocaust survivor. His entire family was killed by the Nazis simply because they were Roma and Sinti. He is a man who has given his energy and voice to the plight of Roma across Europe, and it is an honor to have him on the show today. This doesn't happen very often on Agenda. It's a pleasure to have you here, Zolny Weiss. Welcome to the show. You are happy about this memorial that's going to be unveiled this week here in Berlin, but you say history is repeating itself for many Roma and Sinti.
It is, as a matter of fact. I am very happy with the unveiling of this monument. It's at last it is what I would call an recognition sure. Of what had been done to our people.
Okay.
And it's so important that right in the center of Berlin, mm-hmm. like the monument for the Jews, we have our own monument now.
Okay, but we're going to talk about that monument in just a second, Zolny. Again, glad to have you on the show. They are some disturbing numbers about Europe's biggest minority. 45% of Roma people live in homes without an indoor toilet or a kitchen. A third are unemployed. 90% live in poverty. And they face discrimination wherever they go. Germany's interior minister has referred to them as unwanted guests. Unwanted guests in a country that tried to wipe them out completely more than 70 years ago.
In the Romani language, it is called the Paraimos, the devouring. 500,000 Roma and Sinti died in the Nazi genocide. It has taken a long time for that suffering to be properly recognized. Today, around 11 million Roma and Sinti live in Europe. When the countries of Eastern Europe joined the EU, many moved to the West in search of better opportunities. But often they have faced discrimination and have not integrated into the wider society. Recently, some groups have been deported from France and Germany back to the Balkans. In many ways, Roma and Sinti are a misunderstood people whose problems continue to be ignored.
Zoni, you say this is a good week for Roma and Sinti across Europe, but why did it take so long to get this recognition?
That's the question I ask myself also. But the stigma on the Romani people, on Roma and Sinti, is so great that it took so many years. The German Zentralrat,
the Central Committee,
of Sinti and Roma, started this 16 years ago, and it took 16 years before the realization of our monument. And I'm still asking myself, why is this? Why are we so disadvantaged? Why are we, as a people, still in the corner of, let's say, exclusion?
Well, you know,
we're excluded in many countries, especially Eastern European countries like Romania, Bulgaria. In Hungary, it's just around the corner here. Mm-hmm. The situation is horrible. People are harassed, and some of them are killed, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, I mean, you referred to the conditions for Roma and Sinti in Eastern Europe as being third world.
Absolutely third world. Yes, they live.
And why is the progress there that we would like to see? Why is that not happening? Is it because the Roma people are not good lobbyists for their own cause? Is that the problem?
It has to do with education, of course. And the European Committee has just, all the member states of the European Union, 27 states, have undersigned the EU framework for integration of Sinti and Roma. But most of the countries don't do anything.
Yeah, I mean, it looks good on paper, but nothing has really happened, right? No,
and it has to do with education, with healthcare, with education, healthcare,
housing.
Housing, yes, very, very important. And without proper education, you cannot have a good position in this society.
Let's talk a little bit about your story, Zod. You survived the Holocaust, and you've become an outstanding representative of the people that from which you come. Talk to me a little bit about what happened to you when you were a little boy.
Well, I lived in the Netherlands. As a matter of fact, my father was a musician, like most Sinti are, and also repaired musical instruments. And in 1943, we lived in a wagon and traveled around as a family. Wherever we had an engagement, we went there with the whole group. But in 1943, my father decided to live in a house. So he rented a shop in a little town in the Netherlands. And we lived there. We were a happy family. Father, mother, my two sisters, and my brother.
Well, he decided to stop traveling because he thought it would be safer if you stayed in one place.
Absolutely. And but in 1944, the Nazis decided that all the gypsies, all the Sinti and Roma in the Netherlands should be rounded up and sent to Auschwitz.
And you saw your family rounded up and put on a train?
Yes. And I was on that train station, and my aunt and some other family members were able to flee from that station with the help of a police officer.
Yeah, you say it was a Dutch police officer who saved your life. I mean, I've read that you remember seeing your sister's blue coat
Yes.
flapping through.
My father had my sister's blue coat, and I still can feel how wonderful that soft the coat was, how soft. And my father had hung that for these cattle wagons, you know. So I saw immediately where they were. And my father shouted out of the train to my aunt, "Musla, take good care of my boy, take care of my boy." And with the help of this policeman, we were able to run. And it's unbelievable. The whole station was filled with soldiers, with policemen. And this little group of 12 people was able to jump in another train. It's unbelievable, but right at that moment, that other train started to run.
And this is how you were able to escape.
We escaped.
And you say you never saw that Dutch police officer again who saved your life?
No, unfortunately, no. I have tried and tried. I have never. He was a member of the what's called in German Widerstand.
Resistance.
Resistance. So I don't know his name, but I own my life at this man.
And you've spent your life talking about that experience, trying to educate people. Do you think there would be more progress if there were more people like you?
Absolutely. But it also has to do with education again. That's the key on the lock to a better future. Education, education.
Maybe if
because if you learn to think for yourself, then you can manage to change your situation.
Maybe if you could maybe explain for the audience, trying to understand the value system of the Roma and Sinti. You said your father decided to stop traveling.
Yes.
Wanted to stay in a house. You were able to go to school. Do the parents of Roma children, are they hurting their children by moving around so much? And because the children are never in one place long enough to establish roots, or maybe to go to school at a place for an extended period of time? Or is this the traveling culture, is that actually hurting the children when it comes to getting an education?
Let's make it clear. I think 80% of the Roma don't travel. They live in houses in Eastern Europe. So only in Western Europe is a lot of traveling. But you're right. The elderly people should allow their children to go into school. And
how do you change that, though, Zoni? I mean,
that's
you're an example of what happens when that changes. How do you convince these people to put their children in schools?
Like in the Netherlands, at the Sinti children, now about 95% of all the Sinti children go into school. It took us a long, long time. It takes a long time. You can't change something that has been for ages in a certain way. You can't change that overnight. But we managed in the Netherlands, but also in Germany, to send our children to school. And that's the start of a much better future.
I was also reading that for the Roma people, the life expectancy in Eastern Europe is about 10 years less than it is for other people. And maybe I can bring Judith in on this as well. The Roma and Sinti people are also known for being heavy smokers. One reason maybe, as you and I were talking before the show, is these are poorer people, and poorer people tend to be the ones who the tobacco companies win over.
They do. Within any society, it tends to be the poorer people who are the smokers. And within countries in the world, it's the poorer countries now where there are far more smokers than there are in the Western countries of Europe and North America. And that has huge implications in terms of poverty. If you're paying out money to buy packets of cigarettes, you're diverting income that could go and buy food or buy education. You've got poorer health. You often have less access to health care. You're not looked after as well. And then there is this big discrepancy in terms of life expectancy between smokers and non-smokers. So that's very possibly one of the reasons that there is that disadvantage.
And the Roma and Sinti, they are maybe an excellent example of how the battle has not been won in the West to get people to stop smoking?
Well, I think health education in the West is very good at reaching the middle-class educated people. It's much less good about reaching the least privileged in any society. Health educators speak a professional language. They don't speak the language of kids on the street. I think that's really one of the problems. And that's why governments have got to do a lot more things, such as tax increases, such as smoke-free areas. But in general, it's the middle classes who are now giving up and becoming non-smokers.
And Christoph, let me pull you in on this too. The Roma and the Sinti, they're Europe's largest minority. You are a transatlanticist. You look a lot at what the United States does. You know a lot about what the United States does in its efforts to integrate minorities in society. Is there anything that Europe can learn from what the United States is doing when it comes to actually integrating the Roma people into society?
Yes, I think what I've learned from my American friends is that they first, when they meet somebody, focus on their talents and what they can bring to the society and how they can contribute to the society and to a whole variety. And I think that's a point of view and a mindset that helps for integration.
Mm-hmm. I agree wholeheartedly. We can give the world so much. Our culture is very old. Music, for instance, is one of the things that we are very well educated and strong in. Mm-hmm. We have beautiful composers, etc. So I agree wholeheartedly.
And what about your talents, Zoni? I mean, you are I'm going to give you this title. You are the florist to the royalty of Europe, aren't you? I mean, you know Holland's Queen Beatrice,
yes,
correct?
I do. As a matter of fact, I've worked for 4 generations of our royal house. And this is fantastic, of course. I did the weddings of our crown prince, the coronation of our queen, and made very many exhibitions where our royalty was involved. Mm-hmm. And through my work, I had a chance also to talk about, everybody knows that I'm a Sinto. Mm-hmm. So through my work, I had a chance to talk about our people and how we are, and that we have to be accepted for what we are and what we do, and the gift we have to give to the world, as a matter of fact, and that's very, very important.
Well, I know this is going to be a very important week for you, Zoni, and again, congratulations to you and all that you have been able to do, and again, thanks for coming on the show this week. We need to move on. If it wasn't clear to you before Monday's U.S. presidential debate, it should be now. The state of the American economy is dominating the campaign for the White House. In a showdown that was supposed to be limited to foreign policy, both President Obama and Governor Romney turned the talk around to domestic issues, especially when it came to China. Let's listen to some of the sparring from the debate.
I congratulate him on taking out Osama bin Laden and going after the leadership in al-Qaeda. But we can't kill our way out of this mess. We're going to have to put in place a very comprehensive and robust strategy to help the world of Islam and other parts of the world reject this radical, violent extremism, which it's certainly not on the run.
We'll get to that, but let's give the president a chance.
The other thing that we have to do is recognize that we can't continue to do nation building in these regions. Part of American leadership is making sure that we're doing nation building here at home. That will help us maintain the kind of American leadership that we need.
Got to champion small business. Small business is where jobs come from. 2/3 of our jobs come from small businesses. New business formation is down at the lowest level in 30 years under this administration. I want to bring it back and get back good jobs and rising take-home pay.
The kinds of budget proposals that you've put forward, when we don't ask either you or me to pay a dime more in terms of reducing the deficit, but instead we slash support for education, that's undermining our long-term competitiveness. That is not good for America's position in the world.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Christoph, when you watch this debate, I would say that President Obama was looking very presidential in this debate.
Yes, indeed, he did, but I was surprised that Romney did as well. I mean, doesn't he look like a president of the United States? Only his image he presents visually.
Well, I noticed he did have the red and blue tie on, and I know presidential campaign advisors always say wear the red tie because it's a sign of power and it makes you look presidential. So
he's an expert.
He got that one right.
Yeah, he's an expert in all kinds of binders. But I think, and he also has a huge flag pin. But what I mean is that he was talking about what he has in common with the Democrats and how he is embracing the whole society. So completely different from what he has presented before, earlier in this campaign. So he moves towards the center more and more. But Obama did a good job in pointing this out.
Yeah, but how is it possible, Christoph? I mean, you mentioned the binders quote from the last debate when he talked about binders full of women. Yeah. You know, that got a lot of play on social media. A lot of people said, you know, he really hurt himself there by showing how out of touch he is with the plight of women, especially on the labor market. How was he able to completely wipe that away and go into this third debate and come out looking relatively unscathed?
Maybe it had to do with this leisure time he took before, so that he really, for himself, in his mind, made this break and then went into the debate quite new. I'm not thinking that this binders full of women thing and other bits of the debate, they were discussed on the internet, have that huge effect. I think it banalizes the whole discussion when you focus on a phrase like this. I mean, what he wanted to say originally is that he sees the potential of women, and then under pressure, he was on the TV show, he catched the wrong phrase.
But it's all about image with these debates, though, isn't it? I mean, it's how you come across in the time allotted. Either you make it or you don't.
Yeah, but I think this self-confidence he showed made him look presidential to me. So I think he also did a good job, but I also think that the American people are not stupid, that they can see how quickly things changed and what's the content and what's presentation.
Let me pull in Judith and Zoni on this. Was it interesting to you that this was a debate that was supposed to be on foreign policy, but it seemed like almost at the end of every question, we saw the candidates turning it back to domestic economic issues. It was always about jobs. Isn't that the sign of a superpower that is preoccupied with itself and doesn't have time for the rest of the world?
I would agree with that. I think if you look at what matters to the American people, it's an internal economy. It's not the global picture at all. It's not their position in the world. It's not even their position as leaders as much as whether they will have jobs or not and whether they can keep their houses. And we've certainly seen, for example, in health, America slide from being very much a world leader and helping the rest of the world into quite a secondary place in terms of world leadership.
And that was also implied last night by President Obama, that the projection of American power is completely dependent on the health of the American economy and its people. He said that.
Well, I have to say the two go hand in hand. I mean, if you haven't got a healthy population, if you look at the basics of health, you really are not going to have a healthy economy. You're going to have massive bills for sickness and time off work. You're going to have environmental costs and so on. So I think this issue of health and wealth moving together is one that, as far as I can see, has been completely ignored in the debates.
We're going to talk about health and wealth in a few minutes when we talk about smoking. Zoni, what about you? What was your take on this debate?
I haven't seen the debate, as a matter of fact. I flew in last night very, very late. But overall, yes, I am an Obama fan. But I understand that this debate is about the internal problems of the United States. And as soon as people feel it in their pocket, that's what it's all about. And they don't care what happens in the rest of the world. They're very much focused on themselves. And that's about this debate was all about.
Is that unsettling, though, because the entire world is watching this election? It happens every 4 years, and it does matter who was in the White House. It matters for the entire world. Is it unsettling to all three of you that the only superpower remaining on the planet is so important and at the same time doesn't want to be so important?
Yeah, I don't think that they focus, I mean, that was only the discussion, that they focus on themselves. They both expressed in the latest debate their understanding or what they are thinking about America's role in the world. And Romney said that he still believes in America's role as a world policeman. And Obama more presented himself as a moderator who builds alliances and discusses and puts effort into diplomacy.
Yeah, he's very much a Clintonite, isn't he? He likes to talk about building bridges.
Yes, yeah. And that's also an interesting point of the discussion, that this was not explained as a point of weakness by Romney, that he agreed somehow to that these weak kind of approaching international issues is right.
Yeah, I mean, I was struck also on this. I mean, if you remove the talk about Iran and Israel, there was actually a lot of agreement between the two men, and Romney didn't have a lot of criticism for the rest of Obama's foreign policy. What did strike me, because I watched the debate, the candidates did not talk one time about the Eurozone crisis.
Oh, really?
Not one time. And we know from what Obama has been saying for the past year, what Timothy Geithner has been saying, the U.S. Secretary of Treasury, that they are terrified of the Euro contagion spilling over and creating another recession in the United States. And yet we did not hear one word about that last night. Now, help me here. Is there an explanation for that? Did they simply forget?
Brent, you're talking about superpower, the only superpower in the world. But that's also a military superpower. But isn't the superpower, isn't the Far East not going to be the superpower in the world?
Yeah, my producer just said that in my ear. Let's talk about China as the superpower. Are we
and
ready?
Not only China,
are we ready?
India.
And India. Are we ready to do that? To talk about another superpower already on the world stage?
We have to have a totally different perspective on this subject. It's moving so fast. And I'm convinced that the Far East is going to be the superpower in the world.
And that's where America probably will have to direct most of its attention. And if that's the case, shouldn't Europe be worried?
Yes, in fact we are. That's the topic of our discussions we had in our initiative of Young Transatlantics, how important this transatlantic partnership is, and we want to do our part to strengthen it. Mm-hmm. And we talked about this with the ambassador of the United States.
Here to Germany, Philip Murphy.
Phil Murphy, mm-hmm. Yes. And he said, we are worrying too much. He says, if you have an international problem, the president, he was talking, of course, about Barack Obama, is first calling London, France, or Germany.
Okay.
And so he said this will be the strategic...
It's an alliance that is so strong that you don't even need to talk about it.
Yeah, that's his point of view. And he, as a Democrat, said this will even be the case with Romney.
Mm-hmm.
So
we'll have to see. Well, we'll know in about 2 weeks from now. But let's move on, because I'm sure that Judith is going to have a little bit more to say about wealth and health. The world's leading physicians and medical researchers are in Berlin this week for the World Health Summit, and that includes Dr. Judith Mackay, a leader in the fight to end smoking across the globe. Now, the number of people who do light up is increasing, but that is only part of the picture.
Some 10 million cigarettes are sold every minute around the world. Most of them are smoked in low and middle-income countries, which have been experiencing a tobacco epidemic in recent years. But two of the biggest consumers are now fighting back. China has long been one of the easiest places to light up. But last year, the government stepped in and banned smoking in most public places. Russia will follow suit by prohibiting smoking in any public place from 2015. Nearly 1/3 of the population there is hooked. A packet of cigarettes costs just €1.50. The West is also on the offensive. In Australia, a new law will see cigarettes sold in packets adorned with graphic images of smoking-related illnesses. The tobacco industry isn't taking that lying down. It's responded by launching legal challenges and has been fighting the introduction of tough anti-tobacco legislation every step of the way.
Judith, I want to pick up again. We were just talking about the United States and the campaign. The power of the tobacco industry in the United States is still rather immense, isn't it?
It's extraordinary at many different levels. For example, if you look at campaign contributions, which go mostly, I might say, to the Republican Party. If you look at the number of tobacco industry lobbyists in Washington, there's about 170, 180 who do nothing but try and influence Congress and influence the political system. But even if you look globally, the new strategy of the tobacco industry, and I would say it's new within the last 3 or 4 years, is to challenge governments, to launch legal challenges based on either the Constitution or on trade agreements, or even invoking the World Trade Organization.
Where are we seeing that?
Oh, you're seeing it just about everywhere, particularly in Uruguay, in Australia, that are trying to introduce the plain packages. They've had 3 challenges, one constitutional, one on a bilateral trade agreement with Hong Kong, and then the World Trade Organization has also been brought into it. And the effect of this is enormous, because to start with, it is bogging down the whole process of getting legislation through. I mean, I spoke to the Minister of Health for Scotland and Iran recently in the same week.
Okay, for Scotland and Iran. Okay, that's
and they both said
two
exactly the same thing.
Really?
They said, we've both got legal challenges against trying to introduce tobacco control legislation. Half our staff spend their time either in court, answering lawyers' demands for information under Freedom of Information Act. We're using funds that should be used to fund tobacco, but to fund this legal process. But even worse, I think, is the fact this is incredibly intimidating to all countries. I mean, a country like Cambodia or Laos, they would be very hesitant to take tobacco control action.
Is there a campaign in Iran to try to get people to stop smoking?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
There's a campaign, in fact, in most countries in the world. And when we look at the world and its sort of domination, it's interesting that the US is one of the very, very few countries that has not ratified the international UN treaty, the WHO Convention on Tobacco Control, whereas every country in the Western Pacific region has ratified it. The US has fallen behind on this.
And is that because of the lobbying money of big tobacco?
I think you'd have to ask America that, but I mean, it's
come on, you know about the fight. Is that what you would assume?
Well, I think Americans don't like signing supranational treaties.
Okay.
They don't like supranational jurisdiction. They haven't even signed the rights of the child yet, believe it or not. So it's partly in keeping with that, but it's also partly that it's a refusal to actually accept that this is really international. We have to do things international. We have to do the same things.
Talk to me about Asia. You've been in Asia for 40 years. Is that really is that the ground zero now of the fight against tobacco?
It is a ground zero, and it's a ground zero for 2 reasons. One is we have the massive populations where I live of China and India and Indonesia. We have big populations, and they are also becoming economically more prosperous, so they can afford to buy the cigarettes. And that's why we are more the focus at the moment than, say, Africa, because of that economic element. And certainly I think that the tobacco industry thought they could just gallop the Marlboro cowboy into Asia and it would be theirs for the taking. And they themselves have identified it as Asia as being their utopia. No discussion of the year 2000, they said years ago, would be complete without considering the most important feature on the landscape, the China market. If they could persuade Chinese men to switch to the big tobacco brands, and if they could persuade Asian women to start smoking, it wouldn't matter if every smoker in Germany quit tomorrow.
Well, and that's what's happening, isn't it? I mean, we've got over 300 million smokers in China. And the target, you've said yourself, is the woman in China now, because the image we're seeing in China is that smoking equals emancipation.
That's correct. And the tobacco industry are exploiting that. All their messages to women in Asia are, you've come a long way, baby. They even use that same slogan that was used 40 years ago in the US. And they're saying to women that they are more independent, they're more emancipated, they're their own woman, they don't listen to their parents or their teachers as they used to. You have come of age. And they are equating that coming of age with starting to smoke. So I think we can never drop our vigilance about what's happening in Asia.
What the fight against smoking, is it also a matter of economics? Would we be able to convince more people to stop smoking if the price for a pack of cigarettes were to go up tenfold?
I think the one most important thing that you can do to reduce smoking is actually a fiscal measure, and it is putting up the tax. And it's just very simple. It means children can't afford it. And people think of health education in schools as being important. Up to now, traditional health education has not reduced smoking at all, nor has a ban on sales to minors. In fact, we have what we call a scream test. If the industry screams, then we know that it's an effective measure. And they scream at tax increases, they scream at smoke-free areas, and they scream at advertising bans. So we know those are the three things that are most worth doing.
Okay, so you've got the screaming on the side of the tobacco industry. Governments, though, scream when you talk about banning tobacco or having fewer people smoke because they're afraid of the tax revenue that they're going to lose.
Well, I couldn't agree more. I think one of the biggest obstacles to tobacco control is a misconception by governments that if they put up the tax, they will lose money. Not true. That if they introduce advertising bans, the advertising industry will suffer. Not true. That if they introduce smoke-free policies by law, that restaurants will go out of business. And just one example is in Hong Kong. We looked at the tax returns from our restaurants just before the ban. 2 years later, it went up 32%. And that's the global experience. It does not harm the economy. Tobacco control is actually good for the economy.
Okay, so an economy is actually going to make more money if people stop smoking. Is that because you have fewer people who are sick?
You have far fewer people who are sick, so you have far fewer medical and healthcare costs. You have a lot less environmental damage. For example, a third of all fires in the world are caused by careless smoking. The amount of billions of cigarette ends that people drop on the floor have got to be picked up. There's a whole range of both environmental and health costs.
Why isn't, though, personal health enough to convince people to stop smoking?
I would think I think it's true to say in most health issues nowadays, whether it be obesity or lack of exercise or alcohol, tobacco, that there has to be an economic equation. That's why we need health economists to persuade and to show the governments that it's in their best interests. And the World Bank has actually just recently kicked in to the whole debate on non-communicable diseases. And they and the World Economic Forum have very clearly said, take tobacco control, take measures now. It is much cheaper in the medium to long term.
Who at this table is a smoker or has been a smoker?
I have been a smoker, unbelievable, 2 packs a day.
How many years?
And I started at the age of 12 until I was 46.
Oh, okay. A long time.
And then one night I woke up and I thought, my God, if I don't stop now, it's too late. And that helped me. I quit cold turkey.
So it was the idea of personal health that scared you?
Absolutely.
And Judith,
and
you
everyone,
also...
I was only 16 when I went to Edinburgh to medical school. I was really young and I was away from home for the first time. And I smoked for a few weeks. I just thought I was cool, I was adult, I was independent. I can even remember how I sat holding the cigarette. So I understand that it's that image that really attracts young people.
You are proud if you smoke.
And all of those things. And
I've seen a picture of your father, too, that was on television, and your father also had a cigarette in his hand.
Well, he stopped smoking. He was at sea, and he came home when I had bronchitis, and the doctor said to him, you know, you will really harm your daughter, and he just stopped overnight. So, but I understand that experience was of value to me, because it really helped me understand how young people, they start because it's cool. They want to be independent, they want to be grown up, they want to defy their parents, and you only need less than 100 cigarettes in total to actually become addicted to them and become
Christoph, what about you?
smoker.
You're the youngest man here, the youngest on the table. Are you a smoker? You don't look like a smoker.
No, and in fact, I'm not a smoker. Perhaps a pipe from time to time.
Oh, a pipe.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Okay. There's no safe tobacco.
But what about the people, for example, the young transatlanticists, this group that you're a member of? What about there? Are there many smokers?
No, I don't. I don't think so. And also, when I have a look at my former high school, so when I started, you were allowed here in Germany to smoke on campus when you were 16. So you had, of course, a smoking area.
Yeah.
And this was changed, and here you had
banned. We're running.
Yeah, but you have to go out to the construction sites. That's
and
where
you'll see
find
it there.
the smokers.
We're running out of time. I've been told we're running out of time. A quick question for you, Judith. When will we see globally smoking under 10%?
It's 11% already in Hong Kong. We're looking at an end game of 5%.
For Hong Kong?
Well, New Zealand have said they would do it by 2025, and we're going to try and beat them by 2022. And it's important because the tobacco industry itself has said that smoking would never fall below 10%, and we're just going to prove
And what
them
about
wrong.
China? Because that is the biggest market. When do you see China under 10%?
I think we're looking for 30, 40 years to get that far.
Okay, so mid-century, you think?
Yes, mid-century.
But that's actually rather fast when you consider how long it's taken the West.
Well, in fact, if you look at all epidemics like smallpox, from identification to eradication, it's about 100 years.
Well, we're on track
We just need
then.
to accelerate it a bit.
Judith, thank you very much. All three of you, thanks for coming on. That's going to wrap up this agenda this week. Don't forget, you can watch us online. Go to our website, and don't be shy. Tell us what you think. Our inbox is always open. I'm Brent Goff in Berlin. Thanks for stopping by. I'll see you next time when I set the agenda.